gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?
Your current affairs program, Citizens Hour, is now more inclusive, more educative, and brings you a broader perspective on political and governance matters. This quarter on Citizens Hour, we spotlight issues on democracy, civic education, women and youth participation in governance, and other policy issues. Every Saturday, starting at 10 a.m. and a repeat broadcast at 6 p.m. on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM, Dakar. Also, don't miss our special monthly debate, which comes up every last Saturday of the month on trending political and governance issues in the sub-region. Citizens Hour on West Africa Democracy Radio. It's your time to speak.
I have witnessed so many elections, and I will tell you for a fact that INEC cannot deliver free and fair election.
We need to even unpack what political commitment is.
This April on West Africa Democracy Radio, Citizens Hour goes to the Sahel.
Democracy right now in Mali is an idea that has been rejected.
The Multinational Joint Task Force remains committed to its mandate of creating a safe and secure environment in the Lake Chad areas.
In partnership with the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, your favorite democracy and governance program will focus on Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and other West African countries, including Benin, Nigeria, the Gambia, and Togo. From comprehensive election coverage to informative investigative pieces, this upcoming season will provide new insights and thought-provoking conversations. Citizens Hour Season 2, in partnership with the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, on West Africa Democracy Radio, 94.9 FM Dakar. It's you speaking.
Citizens Hour on West Africa Democracy Radio. It's your time to speak.
Good morning and welcome to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM in Dakar and around the world at WADR.org. I am Veronica Njai and this is Citizens Hour, supported by the National Endowment for Democracy, NED. Today we turn our attention to a question that has become increasingly important as West Africa navigates political transitions, insecurity, growing debate over democratic governance. The question is the civic space under military governance and what the future is for democratic freedoms in West Africa. Now, since 2020, military takeovers in Mali, Burkina Faso, Guinea and Niger have transformed the region's political landscape, while Guinea has since moved into a new political phase following the last year's elections. Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger remain under military-led authorities. These different political experiences raise a broader question. What happens to the space available for citizens, political parties, civil society, and the media during these political transitions? Can governments pursue security and political stability without restricting fundamental freedoms? To explore these questions and more, we have three guests joining us today. In studio, we have Omolare Balogun, Head of Policy Influencing and Advocacy for the West Africa Civil Society Institute, WACSI. Good morning.
Good morning.
Great to have you join us for today's program.
Thank you so
Hopefully
much.
we'll have a very fruitful conversation. We also have Dr. Olowole Ojewale, who is the Regional Coordinator for Central Africa for the Institute for Security Studies. Great to have you join us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, great. Also joining us online, I'm not sure if he is already with us. We have Abubakar Siddiqui Ouattara, who is the spokesperson of the Liberal Bloc in Guinea. Good morning, Mr. Ouattara. All right, I've just received information that Mr. Ouattara is not yet with us, but hopefully he will join us soon for the conversation. To begin the conversation, first, we'd have to understand what is happening to the civic space today. When we talk about the civic space in now I'll start with you, Mr. Or Dr. Olowale. When we talk about the civic space in Africa, what exactly are we talking about, and how do we determine that the space is either open or shrinking?
Thank you so much for having me. The civil space basically is talking about civil liberty, the right that citizens have to free movement, free expression, everything that is at least guaranteed under the constitution of their countries and global norms and international laws, that guarantees that you can also participate in democracy, right to vote and to be voted for, the respect for the freedom of association, anything that comes under civil liberty. We thought that is what we describe as civic space. But the interesting thing about the civic space is that it is also something that thrives under a democratic system, or expectedly to thrive, because in the recent time, both military authoritarians and their Democrats counterparts have also thrown the civic space into a state of chaos. So why largely democracy guarantees the pursuit and the realization of those things that come under civil liberty as the software of democracy, it is also not always guaranteed, and that is the reason why civil society, the media, continue to have this conversation, particularly in the light of what we've seen in the recent time. Now, there is a bit of a difference in terms of what our people are experiencing under military authoritarian. We've seen what is coming out in Burkina Faso, in Mali and Niger, particularly political participation, in which political parties have been witch hunted, banned outrightly in certain instances. Journalists have disappeared. Student union banned, and then people can't even challenge what the government is doing. When you have that, then we can say civic space has probably become strong, as in collapse, let me use that word, and it becomes the reign of one man. Even the judiciary comes under attack. They can't grant free and fair judgment. Elections are not holding. You have people who come to power through the barrel of gun, essentially, who I would describe as trade union. That is, you have union of teachers, union of medical practitioners, and all those things. So when people in uniform think because they have access to the gun and they seize the reign of power, that by itself is a demonstration that the civic space has collapsed. And that is what it is in West Africa now. Let me quickly add, like I mentioned, that even under democracy, we were here in Senegal, we saw how protests were resisted, how people died. We've seen that in Guinea. We've seen that in Nigeria. We even saw it in Ghana during the protests Fix the Nation, how people were arrested. So I'm saying that civic space is going under friction generally in West Africa now. And if we stretch it, not only in West Africa, I think globally, and that is the reason why organizations who rate country as free, partially free, you've seen this fluid in which countries continue to move from one place under their rating to the other. So I think civic space globally is under serious threat now.
All right. I'll shift to you, Omolara. Obviously, you've heard from Olowale. There have been a lot of instances that have been mentioned to determine whether civic space is shrinking or is open. Now, looking at your work with civil society organizations in West Africa, what would be your interpretation of what is happening in the region? Would you say is open, or would you say shrinking?
Thank you so much. Absolutely, it is not open. It is shrinking and almost closed completely. I mean, when we look across the region, like Dr. Wally said, we currently have 3 of the countries in former ECOWAS, under military regimes, Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. And we understand that where this kind of regime exists, citizens' rights, freedom of expression, association, and assembly is usually the first target, to be removed. And outside these three countries, even when we look across the coastal states, the Nigeria, the Ghana, the Liberia, Sierra Leone, etc., we can also see manifestations of shrinking civic space and a kind of a threat to the work that civil society does and their ability to operate as freely as it's expected under international law and even under local laws. And this is a fact that the recent report from Civicus, as at last year, we used to have one country in West Africa that was open, which was Cape Verde. But the last report actually changed that. So all the countries in West Africa now have been rated narrowed, obstructed, or restricted. And what this means is that the situation is not getting better. And for civil society, it's a whole lot more challenging, especially because civil society organizations are the closest to the people. They work with communities. They stand in the gap where the marginalized groups cannot speak. They are the voice of the people. They help people to demand for their rights, to engage government, either through advocacy or through accountability, demanding for inclusion, etc. But we now realize, what we are saying across the region now is that this set of people who stand in the gap for millions, over 400 million West African citizens, are by in themselves under serious targets. And you see, in addition to shutting down political parties and the likes in the AES country, the Sahelian countries, we are seeing the same, manifesting across the other countries, especially civil society organizations working around social justice issues, those who are demanding for human rights, protection of citizens, those who are demanding for, anti-corruption crusaders, those who are demanding for accountability, those who are really demanding for democracy to deliver dividends to the people, those who are holding government accountable, to deliver your promises to your own people. Look at journalists. Many media stations have been shut down across the different countries. Nigeria, journalists are being arrested. They are now self-censoring themselves because, there's this fear of potential reprisals. And then it means you have to watch what you say because you don't want to just get picked up. I remember a couple of weeks ago, we were having a training in Abuja, Nigeria. And at the end of the training, one of the participants couldn't get to his house because he was picked up, and he was a journalist. In addition to that, we are seeing a lot of targeted harassment for organizations themselves and through different means. For example, we have so many governments now that are under the guise of national security now instituting different retrogressive laws to, control civil society and the space in which they operate. Of course, in their interpretation, nobody's above the law. We're trying to caution and be sure that we as a civil society are not being used as proxy, terrorist financing, etc. But we know when you look at the, real interpretations of these laws, it restricts civil society's functionality. It's difficult to operate where the law says that, you can't mobilize certain amount of resources to support the work that you do. Or in some instances, when you mobilize that resource, it has to come through a government designated bank, And in addition to that, when you look at the administrative procedures that most governments are putting in place to control, they would say to guide civil society, you realize there is more of control than the other. We have so many civil society across different countries, Nigeria, Ghana, even here in Senegal, that are so under the burden of multiple regulatory demands on regulatory obligations. And in instances where they are unable to meet one or two of these obligations, they get shut down. And we can see that civil society, as it were, do not have the space and the freedom to function. And what this means is that many citizens will be furthered, denied their rights, in that stance. And it also means that when civil society don't have the space to operate freely, it means they cannot defend or stand in the gap for the citizens. And it gives the government the free will to just do anything. You can't question the executive, you can engage the legislative, and of course the judiciary. It's another new form of existential threat to civic operations. Now we are seeing a lot of government using the judiciary to further gag civil society, where government is taking you to court when it used to be the other way around. And we can see that the court in itself is becoming an instrument of oppression to civil society, especially those who are working around, social justice issues. So it's a very simple answer. Civic space is not opening in West Africa. In fact, it is further closing. And our prayer and the work that we are doing is to ensure that it does not come to a state of total closure. And this is why the role of civil society is very important, especially those who are pushing back on these restrictions, those who are advocating, and those who are still standing in the gap despite the different, challenges and complexity that the space presents at this moment.
All right, interesting. Dr. Ojewale, it's a lot that she said, especially saying that, or describing the situation as a situation where we're saying that the civic space is almost closed. That's a very interesting argument, but I'll bring you in. When we look at the civic space today, why is it particularly important, especially in periods of political transitions?
Yes, because the period of political transition is also the period of contestations. And, when we talk about civic space broadly, we also have to include the right of political parties to participate in an election. We've seen instances where opposition figures are randomly picked up, randomly disenfranchised, and you see that the backlash is that people come on the street to protest, and when they protest, the state also handles that with high-handedness in terms of how people are being restricted, how people are being arrested, and then the judicialization in which court is also, there is also the lawfare in which the law is actually used. Law are randomly propounded, targeting specific group, political parties. So period of political transition, it's natural because politicians will say in politics everything is fair, even though that statement is not to be taken as it is uttered. To politicians, election is not only won through the ballot. If you can obliterate your opponent, some politicians will go to that extent because they want to get power at all cost. If you put all this together, you realize that contestation for political power comes with a serious pressure on the civic space. Some people are completely disenfranchised from voting because of the political allegiance that they hold. Certain communities could be disenfranchised. Those are issues that come to the fore during the time of political transition. Even if you, for genuine reason, you are leading a protest, the first thing that politicians will say, it is opposition that is sponsoring them, even though those protests might be genuine. So you see a convergence of so many things at the same time, in which contestation for power actually frame whether civic space is going to be open for all or is going to be restricted to the advantage of certain individuals. Unfortunately, presidential system of government also wield enormous power. I mean, the president. So in this regard, you find out that the law enforcement agencies, rather than being loyal to the constitution of the state, they are rather loyal to the man in power. You see these across board, and it's not peculiar to Nigeria. Even in Western democracy, that a lot of people gravitate towards. We've seen that recession in the past 6 years or so now. So when you put all this together, I think politics frame disposition and actions. And unfortunately, the bedrock of the civil liberty that we're talking about is also election. Because if people are able to circumvent the process, the implication is that the person who is going to come to power is not going to respect the rule of law. And the foundation of civic space is the rule of law, which is the right that guarantees that everybody is going to be accorded fair hearing and fair treatment. That is what civic space is all about. Unfortunately, the democracy that was built and that is being enjoyed in West Africa, for instance, as a subject of interest, built on liberation struggle. Let me put it that way. Labor union, you find, or farmers, the subalterns, the people that you would consider to be not really major voices in the society in terms of access and control of power. But you realize that these are the people that were mobilized to roll back the colonial list back to their station. And even when we started experiencing the surge of military coup, which was all over the places, with the exception of Senegal and I think Cape Verde, and it's good that this conversation is taking place here, you realize that it is also this group of people, journalists who lost their lives in the process, and other civil society actors who helped to also roll back the military back to the barrack. So we've always said this. The only thing is that I think the tolerance level has reduced drastically in the last few decades, that dissenting voices are seen as being sponsored, maybe locally or internationally. But for democracy to thrive, you need all ideas on the table. And that is what the civic space guarantees.
All right, you mentioned something about political parties, and great that we have a political actor joining us from Guinea. Welcome, Mr. Ouattara. Thank you for joining us. I'm not sure if you're muted, but if you're muted, kindly unmute so we can hear you. All right, I think he is experiencing some network challenges, but we'll go ahead with the conversation until he can have that sorted. Still looking at the civic space, I'll ask you, okay, are you back? It seems like we have him back, so that we'll just...
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was a network problem.
All right.
Hope you guys are good.
Yes, we are great. And thank you once again for honoring our invitation. Mr. Ouattara, Guinea has moved from military rule into a new political phase following last year's elections. From the perspective of political actors, what has this transition meant for political participation and civic engagement?
As you guys have already said, it's the challenges that we are also facing here. Let's say during the transition, it was difficult for whether politician or civic society people to express themselves, because the transition leaders thought that anytime you want to take, you want to express yourself, it should be in their way. As soon as you criticize, you have a problem with them. But today, we are now out of the transition formally, but it's still the same thing. The civil society and the politicians still don't have the space to express themselves. The journalists who are exercising today are all in the way of the government. Any journalist who has to give the speech to a politician or to a civilian to express himself, he makes sure that you are not going to criticize. It is a challenge.
So you would say that, yes, there is a change of regime, but the basis or the structures are still the same?
Still the same, because the government has not changed. The same people who leaded the transition are the same people who are still in power. I mean, all the ministers have been reconducted. All the institutions are still the same. So, yeah, we feel like we are still in transition.
All right, that is a very interesting perspective, Dr. Olowale. You heard from Mr. Ouattara regarding the conditions. How important is it, I mean, for not just political actors like himself, but citizens in determining whether a political transition ultimately succeeds or fails?
Yeah, I think it's rather unfortunate. Because I remember growing up and as a Nigerian, and haven't seen quite, a few military officers entering into the barracks or into the house and coming back in mufti suddenly means that we have democracy. I don't know if you get, the analogy. Democracy, it's an ideology, and it has its principles. And those principles are very central to its practices and how it operates. Where you do not have freedom to express yourself, which is one of the fundamental bedrock of a functional democracy. Democracy creates rooms for debate, for ideation, for disagreement, negotiations, discussions. These are very important. And it is also a kind of government that gives rooms and spaces for everybody to participate. So regardless of who you are or what your trajectory had been, if the government you run does not weave those principles together, that's not democracy.
Omolara, I'll just bring in the case of the Gambia.
Yeah.
Yes, the coup happened in 1994, but Jammeh was in power. Elections were held, but the Gambia is still described as a country that suffered 22 years of dictatorship. So basically what you're saying is elections are not just the determinant of whether democracy is or the civic space is open.
Absolutely. It is not. Election is important because it gives the opportunity for the citizens to elect their leaders, to contribute to that process of electing leaders for next 4, 5, or whatever years. It makes it participatory. But what is much more important is how governance is done between one election to another. And this is exactly where the tenets of democracy must manifest itself in real sense. From one election to the other, governance must be participatory. It must create an enabling environment for citizens to move freely, to speak, to ask questions. In fact, asking questions is one important element of a functional democracy. And if the opportunity for oppositions, for citizens to ask questions, not necessarily even demanding accountability, but even ask the whys, the hows, the when, the wheres becomes a problem, then that is not democracy. So we need to move beyond using electoral processes or elections as a yardstick for defining everything that democracy means. So when you look at the Gambia, for example, since Yahya Jammeh was removed, the Gambian has been going through the process of transition. Gambia is still categorized till today as a country in transition. And look at where we are. The state of things, of politics, political economy of the Gambia, it's not so much different from what it used to be under Jammeh. And what this means is that until our leaders, until our people, until those at the ends of our fear truly understand what democracy means and how it should run, then we continue to move in this vicious cycle. Everybody, when you look at even Nigeria is a democratic country, yes and no. In a situation where the opposition, right now Nigeria is heading towards the next election in 2027, January, February 2027, and we can see the optics. It seems Nigeria is heading to a single state system, if you like, because the incumbent has almost absolute power. And what this means is that these are things that do not really define what true democracy is. It must be participatory. So any contest you have, whether it's Guinea-Conakry, or the Gambia, or Nigeria, where dissent is not allowed, where people cannot participate without fear of reprisals or any kind, where the state is not totally pluralistic in its nature and its doings, then that democracy is questionable. So when we link that to civic space, I think one of the things that we need to pay attention to It's out to run a governance affairs that brings everybody into the picture, because people must contribute to their own affairs, to their own governance. And the environment must, if you're not contributing at the local level, at the state level, at the national level, you're not in the parliament, it has to happen. Because, and when we talk about, how people, especially young people, are now disenchanted, to democracy, they don't want to participate. There's an increased apathy going on. You know why? Because they don't have a say. Some will tell you, I'm not going to vote on election day because my votes don't count. They already know the winner. You hear so many people say that. Whatever you do not contribute to, you find it difficult to hold accountable, because there is a complete disconnect between the process and citizens, between leaders and citizens. So I think totally we need to redefine social contracts. The two parties, the demand side and the supply side of governance, must find a way to rebuild trust. Because one thing, and I do say this all the time, the only person who benefits from this gap are those in power. So no, they're not going to force you to participate. If you do not participate, they will be there for the next 4 years anyways. So it's your loss. So we need to weave and reiterate and revigorate that citizens' consciousness. That yes, the process may be challenging, the process may not be perfect, but I still have the right to participate, to questions, to hold accountable. I think this is where the major problem. Many people are still standing, and have stood on that on the fringe for a very long time, saying, this is a challenging terrain. I don't want to participate, especially businesses. Most businesses don't want to get involved in politics. Citizens don't want to participate. They don't want to get involved in electoral processes. It's stressful. It doesn't count. It's manipulated, etc. That doesn't stop these guys from still taking the power. If you have Nigeria, for example, we are over 200 million. And that, as at the last elections, I think the current president didn't even get 30 million or something, 20-something million. What does that mean? The very few who participate will still determine who rules you. So election is important, but definitely it should not be used as a total yardstick for what democracy is. Democracy is much more than election.
All right. I mean, I want us to really transition to security and freedoms, but we cannot transition without really looking at these issues. That is the democratic countries that hold elections and are seen as democratic on paper, but then there are restrictions. So just before we transition to looking back into the military regimes, how do we change the conversation? How do we change the state of civil society in these democratic countries? What should be done? Yeah. What conversation should be had?
Absolutely. I think, first of all, we need to move the conversations from, how do I put it? So human rights and security should not be competing objectives. They're actually complementary. Citizens need protection, because one of the things that many governments have used to define their overreach is on the disguise of national security, anti-terrorism effort, trying to counter money laundering and all of that. But these should actually be complementary objectives. Protecting human rights and protecting citizens, it's very important. So how can we ensure these two can coexist? It's important. Citizens need protections of, lives, properties, and every state, of course, has the right to protect its jurisdictions, from external aggressions, etc. But at the same time, citizens within a particular, a sovereign nation, they also deserves the right to move within that, security architecture. So we must create a security system that is proportionate, a security system that considers the rights, the movement, the needs of the people. Because when we pitch the two against themselves, it's a loss for everybody. So it's very important. We need to move that conversation beyond a competitive objective. It is not. They should, and they are actually complementary.
All right. Thank you very much, Omolara. I'll bring you in, Mr. Ojewale. like like Omolara said, you would see that most governments use the disguise of security when restricting the civic space. What is the relationship between national security and civic freedoms?
Yes, it's a thin line, and it has to be carefully navigated. I think it is the overt response on the part of the state that actually creates the tension. Everything becomes a collateral when the state heightens the concern about national security, which is very important. We're having this conversation here. We're able to drive safely here because national security guarantees it. And don't forget that the fundamental objective of any government is the security of lives and property and the welfare of the people. Security trumps everything. And we cannot sit here under the guise of rule of law, human rights, dismiss that idea of national security. It is very, very important. It's the reason why people are able to drive on the road, go to their villages, and even go to work. We have to break it down to that. Now, the thin line is that it's also vulnerable to weaponization. The state weaponizes everything. The protester shows up, and the next thing is that you want to try them with counter-terrorism law. Whereas the Constitution guarantees freedom of association, freedom of expression, freedom to even protest in a democracy. So that thin line, like I mentioned, needs to be carefully navigated. And we are seeing the rise of that all over the places, even in Western democracy, in our own region in Africa, countries that have not even experienced a shred of terrorism are now framing protesters as and trying them with counter-terrorism law. I think it's a dangerous trajectory that as we are having this conversation in the on this platform in the media, everybody should be interested in the weaponization of national security as a tool of oppression in the hand of sitting government in any country. What it does basically is that then you use that to gag everybody, that even self-censorship now goes on overdrive, in which irrespective of what you want to say, you are thinking, what is government going to make out of this information? What it does is that it silences dissenting voices, and then you are going to see the rise of authoritarians in which nobody can really challenge what the government is doing or saying. But let me also add this caveat, particularly for people, journalists, researchers, whatever you want to say, two things must be the overriding principle that undergets that. One is that is it based on solid evidence? And then you also need to ask yourself the question, what do I stand to lose if I don't say this or if I communicate this? Because I see people who feel I can say anything because I have the right under the Constitution to say whatever I want to say. You know, Idi Amin of Uganda will say you have
freedom of
the freedom of expression. You have freedom of speech.
I saw the last time the Gambia Press Freedom Secretary General was saying that story is not more important than your life.
So you need to, and that is the reason why we also need to really exercise caution. Your life is at stake. What comes to me if they pick me up? Because you're going to have a long day in court to prove your innocence, and you have your life to protect first. But a far-reaching concern for me in terms of personal responsibility is really about what will be the impact of this on national security. And let me give you an example. In this age of disinformation and misinformation, yes, some people have been killed, for instance. The video, you have the evidence that people have been killed. If you volunteer that information on a public platform, what is the risk of inciting further violence? Those are the questions that journalists need to ask. Those are the questions that researchers need to ask before they go public, because we are living at a time where virality is what shapes what even people want to hear or what people want to disseminate. We're living at a time that everybody wants to trend. You must have seen some videos that you ask the question, what exactly is this person trying to make out of this? And you say, oh, these are farmers that have just been killed in a village in Nigeria, whereas that video is coming from Mali or maybe Burkina Faso or anywhere. Misinformation. So that is one. The other thing is when it is really, really authentic. Yes, you've gotten this video from Bayelsa in Niger Delta in Nigeria, and as a journalist or as a researcher, what would be the backlash if the people at the other hand in other place? I know we're pressing for accountability and it's very, very important, but we are at a time that ethics of journalism, that ethics of social research must stand out as a guiding principle that determines why we go public. And that is the reason why, as a researcher, I remember when I was working in Nigeria, we used to have what we call confidential briefing. That this information is so hot, but is it better that we have a confidential briefing with the police? And I'm saying this on the here, that even state authorities must be open to that, because they must not fall on the assumption that they know everything. So when journalists are saying we have this information, or these researchers are saying we have this information, because I think the overarching objective for everybody is that we want a safe country. You can only have a safe country where this regulation, these ethical principles are upheld by everybody. So you need to be guided by that principle of what is the implication for the larger good of the society. Because if those things are not operational as guiding principles, we are going to set countries on fire. That is what the state authorities want to regulate. But sometimes I think they go on the overdrive. And that is the reason why I say there's a thin line between national security concern and the freedom of expression of information, particularly in the age of citizen journalism, in which we now find private influencers who have more followers on Twitter than even established mainstream media. And let me say this, that as we're talking about this, it's also extend to the fact that we need to bear in mind that radio, the invention of radio, challenge established newspaper journalism. The same way that social media is now challenging that mainstream media of newspaper and radio now. And I've seen news houses going to pick sources from major influencers. I think it should be, reverse should be the case. Some of us, if we see news, something being shared by social media influencers now, we want to see newspapers that have published it. But it breaks your heart when you get to the newspaper and they are referencing that person. So these are the things that we need to contend with. Mainstream journalism must realize that authenticity, that confirmation, most citizens still believe it should originate from them. And by the time you have that, newsroom have control and examine what is going public, I think the drive for that virality is going to moderate things that can become inimical to national security. And if a private person is sharing it, then he can face the music by himself and not become a collateral damage to the society. So we need to emphasize that point. It's a thin line between national security and freedom of expression, and we need to continue to educate our people like this. Like, what is the implication for me personally? If I'm picked up and I have to be showing up in court and I have bills to pay for my children, who is going to step into that gap? And then the larger society, this virality, if I share this video, how are the people going to receive it at the other hand? In Nigeria, it happens. Some vigilante people reportedly kill some people in southern part of Nigeria. And then the way the news was received in the other part, the governor of the state had to travel to the other part, Benin, Edo State, to Kano, working with the governor in the other state to calm tension, because, in less than a few minutes, this thing is going viral. And what you're going to see is that at the other hand, people have already started picking arms and killing other people. This is how Rwanda happened. And we have to be very, very careful in this age and time.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Ojewale. Watara, I'll bring you in From political parties and opposition groups' perspective, what are the practical consequences of operating in a political environment where public gatherings, political activities, or criticisms may be restricted? Watara, are you there? Okay, I think
Yes,
yes.
yes, I'm here.
Go ahead, please.
Come again to your
I said
questions.
from a political parties and opposition group perspective, what are the practical consequences of operating in a political environment where public gatherings, political activities, or criticisms may be restricted?
And it's very difficult because you can share ideas only when you have people to whom you share it. So if you are avoided to meet people, you are avoided to have a gathering, you are avoided to have any demonstration, it's difficult for you to share your ideas. And this is the fact in which we are. Today, anyone who wants to express himself is going to rather use his Facebook or his social media accounts to say what he wants to say. But officially, you can organize any demonstration. As soon as you ask for a demonstration or for any, conferences or whatever, they try to know what will be the topics, and as soon as it touches the government, they refuse it. So this cannot be called democracy because we all need to bring out our point of view on the way the country is governed, the way things are done, the way contracts are signed, and this is this is our role in the society as a politician. We are here to see how the government governs, see what are the laxes, and try to let them know that this is not the way we have to do. And if we don't have a space for that, it means we are no more in democracy.
Oh, all right. Guinea, since the elections, has been formally a democracy because of the elections. But would you say much have changed? What would you say have been the major changes when it comes to the civic space?
It's still the same because all those people who had the voice are talking about the civic space. They are still outside. They are still in exile. So if they were back and they have started their activities and they still have the speech, then we could say, yes, the democracy is really here. But the same things we had in what we call transition are the same thing which are here. When we were in transition, there were no possibility for us to have demonstration. It's still the same. When we were in transition, civic organizations had no possibility to contest. We are still in the same context. When we were in transition, people were outside. They all ran away from the country. They are still out of the country. So, do we say we are now in democracy? Yes, we are in democracy on paper and on process, but in action, we are still in the transition.
All right. I'll switch to you, Omolara. Where should governments draw the line between legitimate security measures and restrictions that undermine fundamental freedoms? Obviously, we've heard a lot that Dr. Ojewale has said. He's also spoken about the responsibility of civil society actors and journalists. But then, obviously, the government also has a responsibility if we're looking at the issue. Where should the line be drawn?
Absolutely. I think, like I said earlier, national security and protection of citizens, citizens' rights should never be competing objectives. I think the state needs to be very careful. National security is important. I love the way Dr. Oli put it as, there's a very thin line, especially in this age of digitalization, where things can be manipulated, misinterpreted, and maybe, misconstrued. What is important is that security and laws need to be lawful. Security architecture, systems or plans of the state must be within the lawful ambit, the ambit of the law. We cannot, because of instituting security measures and place it above the law. The law is above everyone. every institutions, every plant, and in the law of the land. And if human rights is constituted within the law, any security measures must respect human rights. Security measures must also be proportionate. We have seen situations where government have kind of, instrumentalized security, national security, to target organizations and individuals that of goodwill, doing public good, and that is where the proportionality, that is where it comes in. We cannot continue to kill flights with a sledgehammer. It's not proportionate. So it's important that security measures are proportionate, in the sense that when you go to, across the different countries, when you go around, you realize that some of the security measures that state, especially when it comes to counterterrorism effort, it's often beyond necessity, and I do understand that it has its own political economy when you do thorough analysis, because when it comes to national security, the budget is not gazetted, it's not checked, and it's being used as a medium for corruptions and etc. So state can really embed a lot of things within that security conversation, national security protection. But I think my point is, I will leave it to 2 points. It must be within the ambit of the law. If we have security measures being introduced, we should be able to checkmate it against the law of the land. We should be able to checkmate it against the right of citizens, the right of institutions, citizens' freedom, ability to associate, to gather, to protest, etc. Picking up protesters, which, you have the right to protest by international standard and by the constitution of various states, have going on protest to make demand for accountability, etc., and being picked up because you're being tagged as security threats. It's totally against the law. It shouldn't be. At the same time, it should be proportionate. The state knows the security issues that it's dealing with, and which is usually done in collaboration with other states. When you look at ECOWAS, for example, response to violent extremism and what is it called, terrorism, etc. It's a collective responsibility which we have a regional architecture for. When that is being done, it has to be proportionate. We cannot continue to utilize security measures that becomes an overreach, to restrict citizens' rights or civil society's ability to operate. On digitalization, we are seeing so many governments that have, employed different surveillances, to watch, to restrict, to target civil society organizations and their actors. And what it means that they are watching you when you are not. They have access to your account, to your programs, which is violations of my privacy. It should not be. That is a violation of the law. So, basically, it should be proportionate, and it should be within the ambit of the law. We should not cross that line. No matter how thin it is, it should not be crossed, and states need to watch that.
All right, speaking about proportionality, Dr. Ojewale, you did mention a lot of things that journalists should avoid in these periods. But again, when we look at the work of journalists are the watchdogs. So let's look at the work of journalists. What role should independent journalism play in maintaining accountability during periods of political transitions and insecurity? Even though, yes, your perspective is noted, what other role should journalists play?
Well, I think you are raising two important points. And one struck me where you mentioned independent journalism. I think that exists in a very small fraction, maybe organizations like yours who don't take advert, and you maybe 1 in 1,000. I'm saying that to underscore the fact that part of the reason why it's very difficult to use the tool of journalism to pull to push back really against government tendencies to undermine the rule of law is because independent journalism is a very scarce commodity today. You can't take adverts from an organization that is also maybe funding a political party, and at the same time you want to take an unbiased position on any national issue. And this has nothing to do with maybe West Africa. If you look at major newsroom, media houses across the world, they have a position that's either ideologically driven or financially driven in terms of the position that they take. Nevertheless, I still believe the journalism has a very critical role to play in modulating the society, both the government and the people, and helping to strengthen accountability in government and educating the people. The challenge we have is that I think social media has also completely transformed the arena in which there is less journalism in educating the people and more in actually just informing the people. You can inform without educating the people, but you can't really educate the people without informing them. So you are achieving two purposes in that regard. So at this critical point, it goes back to what I shared originally. If unfortunately anyway, I need to also say this, that there is a deliberate attempt to also pauperize journalism. You know, if people cannot feed themselves, then they can't pay salary. They have to depend on politicians who are not profit driven. They just want to capture power, and they are ready to provide their resources. Any country that you go, you will almost know the position that a particular media house is going to take on a particular political issue. And that is the reason why some people have decided not to listen to a particular media house or read a particular media house, for instance, because politics seems to have trumped everything. But let me say, out of this, there is a silver lining. Out of all this, there is still journalists that are doing independent journalism, although they are endangered species. In this age and time in which they are also the ones that are not friends of government, they are not collecting brand envelope and all those things. But you can't build a society in which you are not using the tool to actually hold government accountable in this age and time. So we still need journalists because of the wider spread in terms of coverage that journalists have, in terms of how they can inform and educate the public. What do I think we need to do at this critical time is the fact that I think journalism need to deploy the resources that is available to take the word to the arena. And that is the reason why journalism must also go into the social media space where people are consuming information, where people are also creating their own truth, like people used to say now, that I tell my own truth, where at the time that everybody is telling his or her own truth and all those things. But if the journalists play in that arena, then the people know them to be fact-based, to be evidence-driven. They will be able to see whatever they are being fed through the lens of that authenticity that journalism offer in this age and time. And I think we also, I'm just a young man in his 40s, but I think journalism has also changed in the past 1 decade or so. We do not see more of investigative journalism. If journalism is doing investigative journalism, not soundbite, then it puts the government on the toe. You don't need to do it, because everybody is looking for sensational news and all those things. But investigative journalism that is evidence-driven, that in fact the government it's incontrovertible, those are the things that we can do to really make government accountable. If there are no schools in the villages or children are sitting on the floor, teachers are not there, you confront government with evidence, not what a social media handler has posted. So I think these are the areas that I think journalism as a profession can actually distinguish, because investigative journalism is not something that you do on social media and just piece things together. Government are going to respond in kind to that because you are educating the public, and they know that they have a duty to correct the ills that those investigative journalism efforts have actually brought to the bear. So I think those are the areas where I think we can use journalism at this time to actually shape society and drive accountability in government. I'm speaking this because I think we have a common role as a researcher who also take a deep dive into societal phenomenon, which you can't do in a day. You have to go to community, gather information, and synthesize those information. I think there's a lot that a journalism that is research-driven or collaborative with researchers can actually achieve in this age and time to foster accountability in government, and also put the social media influencers who are chasing soundbite and virality where they truly belong. Journalism is the tool that can actually get the work done, because a social media influencer, once they pick him up and lock him up, his news and platform are locked up with him. But journalism have network that they can continue to shape information, shape development in the society. But let us explore and do more of investigative journalism.
All right, great advice there. Watara, I'll bring you in. From the perspective of political actors, how important is access to independent media for meaningful political participation?
Yes, when journalists or media are independent, it means they are going for the right information, which means they are not going to take one side of the information, rather the politician or the government. When a media is independent, it means when there is an issue, they take the point of view of each of parties, which is if governments don't agree with one of the things in a society, the politician may agree with it, and they will compare the different point of view. Being independent, the reality will come up. So yes, it is very necessary to media to be independent, because it's only when they are independent they give right information.
All right, so now let's shift the focus a bit and transition to political participation and regional response. Omolara, I'll bring you in first. What can civil society organizations realistically do to protect civic participation when political space becomes increasingly restricted, especially in collaboration with regional actors?
Yeah. I think that, yes, everybody would love to engage using the traditional mediums because it's a lot easier, it's established, it's there. But where such is being consistently restricted, what are the alternatives? I think that if there is nothing that technology has done till today, is actually giving everybody the opportunity to democratize their voices. We are seeing a lot more citizens journalism, like you said. People are using technology to organize. They use technology, social media, you get what I mean, to organize, to communicate, to ideate, to co-create, to mobilize themselves, and also to send strong message to government, to seek accountability, and also to monitor. You'll be surprised the amount of information, the amount of details that citizens shared online, go on Twitter, go on Facebook, on Instagram, fact that you would not naturally have access to in your own house or your state, especially, those of us living in the diasporan community. It is a grassrooted information that we would normally not have access to. Now you have every one of them online. Of course, I mean, the questions of potential disinformation, misinformation, and all those things arises. But what I'm trying to say is that digital platforms are becoming more accessible, viable, democratizing people's voices, to continue to keep the space open. So technology has been quite helpful in that sense.
Just last week we saw that there was a restriction of social media in Guinea. Instances like that leave or make it very difficult for organizations or for individuals, like you mentioned, to have their voices outside, especially for diasporans, as you mentioned.
So one thing about technology is that technology always comes with its own for and against. So you can, it's way ahead of everything. we continue to see governments restricting, technology, social media, etc. But citizens are way ahead because technology provides that room with VPN and the likes. And that is why organizations like WAXI and so many other are actually taking citizens and civil society communities through using technology, how to use technology in a very preventive, secured manner, disseminating the skills, the information that you need to be able to navigate through technological, platforms, especially when government becomes overreach or begin to restrict those platforms. We run so many trainings and workshops on that. Other platforms that citizens are continuing, to use as alternative is what are we call the democratives, the creative sector. There are so many creative actors that are using their hearts, they're using their space to communicate civic engagement issues. I'm sure you remember the music of the late Fela Anikulapo Kuti's and some of the significance of his music to Nigerians' democracy, to global democracy, and even to global politics. And I know of Yusuf Undo here. I know of Kwabena in Ghana. I know of so many of these actors, including younger generations. I know of Two-Face, for example, in Nigeria. When you listen to some of their lyrics, you realize they are communicating realities of the society and they are asking citizens to engage. Another alternative that I think we don't use much is our research institutions and university. I mean, I'm a product of student unionism. I'm a product of a very strong university background. I graduated from Obafemi Awolowo University. And what does that mean? The kind of culture, civic consciousness that the university, kind of instilled in me is probably what I'm still living on till today. So we can use our institutions, our university platform, our educational platform, our research institutions to begin, to continue to dish out and engage, intellectually on some of these issues that restrict civic space. I don't want to mention, we already know the divides within the religious institution, but citizens across communities continue to use informal networks to engage, informal networks to make demands and to keep their space open. So there are quite a number of alternatives outside. This is not because we want the alternative to replace the traditional institutions of engaging with the parliament, with the executive, with independent judiciary, etc. Those are very important. But where those are being shrunk or closed or limited, there's so many alternatives that citizens are using and we continue to use.
Well, I think it's very interesting that you brought in instances like music, which means that you can actually have your message passed without the formal means. And I think that's very interesting. The diversity of the conversation, the different networks, the different platforms that you've mentioned, I think when adopted could make a huge difference. But still looking at the role that regional organizations can play, Dr. Ojewale, what role do you think organizations like ECOWAS and the African Union have to play or should play when it comes to civic freedoms, especially when they are under pressure within its member states?
Well, it's a difficult one because of recent experiences that I found quite disappointing on the part of regional economic communities, regional political communities. And I'm talking about ECOWAS and AU. I think they could have done better in certain instances because let me start with ECOWAS. The overarching vision is to be the ECOWAS of the people. But as it stands now, it looks like the ECOWAS of the head of state. So I will give you an example. During the crisis in Senegal, a lot of citizens were disappointed in the way ECOWAS handled the matter, the ECOWAS courts, because it should be the final arbiter. But I think citizens were largely disappointed because ECOWAS, as an administrative unit, was not able to maybe call a spade, always issuing one paragraph notes that we condemn and we say authorities should conduct election and all those things. Compare that kind of press release with what the US government was issuing, what the European Union was issuing. This is our own home. This is our own crisis here. So I think ECOWAS must be able to live above the authoritarian tendencies of their head of state. This is a platform where we have to confront ourselves with the truth. You talk about elections. We've seen head of state that are seated who are undermining the electoral processes in their home country, and ECOWAS could not live above that. I'm saying this to say, if they are truly representative of the people in the region, then it should be an institution that is able to call a spade and not a walking tool by dissociating themselves clearly from any tendencies on the part of any state, including the big boys in the neighborhood who are undermining democracy at any point. ECOWAS has a lot of responsibility to the people. We've just talked about the politics. How about the fact that 66 years after independence and almost 50 years, more than 50 years, because I'm aware ECOWAS celebrated the 50th anniversary recently. I think it was founded in 1975, I think, which should be 50 years. How about the fact that now there's no road, there's no regional integration that links a country from Dakar to Lagos, like you do in Europe. If you go to any European country in the Schengen region or the European Union, you can use train to connect every country. So how come that 50 years after independence, we don't have that kind of experience? That people can just decide that they want to go to Guinea from Senegal on road, or to Ghana from Senegal by rail. So those are areas which I think as an ECOWAS citizen, it is unfortunate that when you go about other part of the continent, ECOWAS seems to have gotten the pass mark when compared with other regions, whether it is SADC in terms of regional integration, whether it is EAC or Central Africa, which is the worst in terms of integration. But I think ECOWAS, in spite of that, marks on the paper, assessment on the paper, kudos on the paper, maybe because there is a lot of political mediocrity within the neighborhood. I'm talking about our neighbors, Central Africa, East Africa, in terms of integration. ECOWAS appears to me to be comparing themselves with these other regional economic communities and say we are doing fine, whereas we should do far, far better.
So you think the yardstick should not be used?
No, it should not be used, because I move around on the continent and I see how people pat me on the back and say, oh, your region is doing a bit better. No. We can do far, far better. They should dust the document on rail integration for West Africa. This is the time to build our infrastructure. We have missed the opportunity on the industrial revolution. We have missed the opportunity on digital revolution. We are now at the forefront of artificial intelligence and everything. So if we don't have those basic infrastructure to power regional integration in terms of trade and everything, they are talking about eco-currency now. It's not about spending money. It's about countries being integrated. There are places that you still go in West Africa that they will even question where you are coming from and all those things. Senegal has done a very good work in this regard. And I must pat Senegal at the back here because I live in Senegal as a Nigerian. In Senegal, you come as an ECOWAS citizen. When I went to the immigration office, you just have to come and work here. But our citizens in Ghana still require work permit and all those things. And we're talking about integration. So why can't ECOWAS borrow what is working in other countries and then let it become a uniform across board in terms of what we can learn from each country? And that is why I'm also very happy that the current chair of ECOWAS is from Senegal. I'm hoping that he will be able to introduce the positive that I have seen in Senegal, that other countries will be able to imbibe that. It's not about 90 days, this ECOWAS protocol of 90 days free movement of persons. Senegal is a very good example on democracy. It's a very, very good example in regional integration. They pasted it in the office, in the immigration office, that if ECOWAS citizens only come here and work, we want that to... My friends are working in Ghana, who are Nigeria, who need to be renewed their work permit every year or whatever they call it, and they are ECOWAS citizens. The same thing with other Nigeria and all these places. So I think ECOWAS should stop patting themselves at the back, thinking that we have done a lot. We have not done a lot. We should be comparing ourselves with other regional economic communities in Europe. I want to see the integration in my lifetime, in which somebody will enter train in Lomé. I mean, it's bad that people cannot work in Lagos and live in Lomé. To fly to Accra is 39 minutes from Lagos. So people live in Vienna And they are working in Munich, 4 hours train every day. Comfortable train. You can even put your laptop on the table. Don't say we cannot do that here because they are superior human beings. These are the kind of integration that I want to see in ECOWAS driving in government, in security, in trade and investment, and everything in Africa, which I've not seen.
All right, very, very interesting. Ouattara, I'll bring you in. What is your interpretation of regional response to civic space, especially in your country, Guinea? Do you think they've done enough to help Guineans? If you're there, Ouattara, go on. Okay, I am not sure if he can hear me.
The connection.
All right.
Connection.
Okay, I can hear you now. So I was asking, what is your interpretation?
Hello, can you hear me? The connection is a bit bad. Yeah.
Yes, I can hear you. I was asking about your interpretation of regional responses to what is happening in Guinea, the civic space. You said that it's restricted. Do you think regional organizations are doing enough to help?
No, they are not doing enough to help because many of these civic organizations have complaints on their sides on many issues. We have a politician who is Ali Uba, whose case has been dropped to the ECOWAS justice stage, but still we don't have any outcome of it. They had a decision saying that the government should release the guy, but they have no means to oblige the government to fulfill their decision. It means they just talk. They have no means to impose on a government. If you come to the integration, how many times all the countries have been asking the ECOWAS to really come back on the real role of ECOWAS. ECOWAS is for the people of the different regions. It's not for the head of the head of the countries. But unfortunately, this is what we notice. The ECOWAS is now used as a tool for the head of countries, not for the population. So they have not done enough to help this democracy to live further in our countries.
All right, that's very interesting. I think for some time now, the conversation has mostly been about the ability of ECOWAS to implement some of its decisions or to make sure that countries implement some of its decisions. Omolara, what do you think the problem is?
Well, ECOWAS is an interesting organization, and I dare say that in as much as the organization has been acknowledged to be one of the best recs that we have on the continent, there's still a lot that we have to do. Yes, we have one of the most beautiful texts when you look around in terms of our protocols, charter, etc. ECOWAS has really done a lot of work around ensuring that we have protocols, provisions that are fit for purpose. And even in the area of our visions, developing visions. I'm sure you're familiar with the Vision 2020 and its transition into Vision 2050 with 5 strategic pillars, which one of it responds to Dokwale's growls around movement, like it is in the European Union. But we should not also forget that the organization that's had one of its worst period in the last 5 years. Of course, COVID happens to be a cross-cutting challenge that the entire world had to deal with. But most specifically is the fact that the region witnessed an unprecedented setback to its democratic, ambitions and of course its regional integrations ambitions in the last 5 years. The ECOWAS that started 2020 is not the ECOWAS that we have now, and the loads of 15 people has become that of 12 with the withdrawals of AES, the Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso from the region. And that has actually polarized a number of things in terms of plans, ambitions, vision, etc. And the negotiations took a lot of energy, time, and resources. And what that means is that it makes cohesion, a bit shaky at this point. Even though ECOWAS continue to keep its doors, open, it's interesting to state here that 3 areas of importance has been, formally agreed between ECOWAS and the different 3 countries that exited the union recently around economic cooperation, free movement of person, and security. And I think these 3 areas are quite important to every West African citizens. But to come to your questions, I think that ECOWAS has a lot of work to do and a lot of role to play. And for me, I think the first would be on how the institution itself lives up to its own provision. The major challenge that we have, honestly, is political will. The political will to hold ourselves, for the leaders to hold themselves accountable. That's number one. And if we have a universal political will based on the provisions that we've put together by and for ourselves, as written down in our protocols, we shouldn't have problems. We agree we're going to do A, B, C, D. We put it into text. So if anyone is working outside those provisions, we should also have a mechanism to hold ourselves accountable. That, no, guy, that wasn't the agreement. Let's look at the agreement. So holding ourselves accountable, the leaders holding themselves accountable is one of the weakest link in achieving some of those brilliant and beautiful provisions that we have as ECOWAS. Secondly, and which we may want to shy away from outside the political way, but which is a fact, according to me, is the fact that we have a number of external influences that also continue to drive who goes where and what. And geopolitical dynamics is quite, it's more of an inherited dilemma for this region by the virtue of, Anglophone, Francophone, Lusophone of a thing. We have different formal colonial leaders who still continue to have, influence in how we run our things. And that's in itself, it's sort of using a divisive medium, to control our ability to organize, to agree, and move forward. So I would say that the external influences also tend, because people have different interests. So external interest and influences continue to, erode our ability to move on with some of these provisions. And I would also say the third thing would be around resources. So the region does not lack resources. Do you want to highlights the volume of gold that we have in Ghana, or cocoa in Cote d'Ivoire, or lithium in Niger? And it goes on and on and on like that across, not even beyond West Africa, but in West Africa, or the oil in Nigeria. How have we managed these natural resources? How have we harnessed the power of those resources and the money that they bring into our economy for our own development? I mean, we have so many governments who have probably, I was listening to a friend of mine a couple of weeks ago, was telling me, oh, Nigeria has sold its oil for the next 50 years. And I'm like, no, it's not possible. But when I read it, it's true. What does that mean? So I think we also need to pay attention to our natural resource governance. Citizens need to be interested. We need to be asking critical questions. Why should any government allow gold to be mined from Ghana without being processed in Ghana? Because processing these natural resources across different countries means we are going to create jobs. There's going to be technical transfer, knowledge transfer. We're going to build, universities, or even, departments that attend to different areas of people want to study, what is it called? Is it not geography? Now I can't remember, and they have to travel to Europe to study that, because none of our universities are offering those courses. And these are courses that are closely knitted to the resources we have on the ground. When you go to Republic of Congo, I don't think they have courses in the university that deals with mineral mining or processing and etc. We have to go abroad. So this resource flight, it's a major problem for us because the resources that we need to advance, to accelerate our regional integration and all these beautiful trains that Dr. Wale is talking about, it's not there. And the little resources that we have from internal revenue generation and few coming from outside, we have corruptions, it's been stolen, and then we have illicit financial flows happening, and then corruption. So there are so many challenges that kind of hinders our ability to achieve our regional dreams. Like I said, political will, and then external influences and interest, and the resources to actualize them. So this is why it is not a good time for any citizen to stand at the edge. Because if we continue this way, honestly, I can't say what it will become of us.
All right. Thank you very much, Omolara. We are approaching the end of the program, but I'll just ask a few questions on a minute. Dr. Ojewale, what are the biggest risks for West Africa if the civic space continues to shrink? Just under a minute.
What are the biggest
risk for West Africa?
Yes, I think it's a complete rollback into the dark ages, in which we saw how military rule set back the region, no respect for fundamental human rights. A lot of people just got missing. A lot of people were killed. Because once you cannot demand accountability in government, the supreme ruler does whatever they think they should do. And then if you add this to the present complications that we have in our region, where violent extremism and terrorism is already a major challenge, what shrinking civic space does is that the moment people realize that they are not included, what we call inclusive governance, they look for other outlets to express themselves. So it's a loss to the bigger society and a gain to the people of the underworld.
All right, thank you very much. Watara, I'll bring you in just in 30 seconds. What are the reforms that you want to see, especially regarding the civic space?
First of all, they have to be protected, because if anytime civil society wants to express themselves, they are chased away or they have no possibility to express themselves, it's very difficult for democracy. And they are a kind of garden. They are a kind of garden of all the activities in the society, because they see everything we don't see. They have the possibility to investigate independently because they are working in the on the benefit of the citizens. So we really need to protect them. This should be a real, work that has to be done by the government and all the institutions that have to help the civil societies.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Watara. So today on Citizens Hour, we have been discussing civic space under military governance, what the future is for democratic freedoms in West Africa. My thanks to my guest, Omolara Balogun, who is the head of policy influencing and advocacy at WACSI, Dr. Oluwale Ojewale, regional coordinator, Central Africa, at the Institute for Security Studies, and Abubakar Siddiqui Watara, spokesperson of the Liberal Bloc in Guinea, who joined us online. Thank you for being part of the conversation. And it has been Citizens Hour on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM in Dakar and online at WADR.org. I have been your host, Veronica Njai. Stay safe.
Citizens Hour on West Africa Democracy Radio.
I have witnessed so many elections, and I will tell you for a fact that INEC cannot deliver free and fair election.
We need to even unpack what political commitment is.
This April on West Africa Democracy Radio, Citizens Hour goes to the Sahel.
Democracy right now in Mali is an idea that has been rejected.
The multinational joint task force remains committed to its mandate of creating a safe and secure environment in the Lake Chad areas.
In partnership with the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, your favorite democracy and governance program will focus on Mali, Burkina Faso, Niger, and other West African countries, including Benin, Nigeria, the Gambia, and Togo. From comprehensive election coverage to informative investigative pieces, this upcoming season will provide new insights and thought-provoking conversations. Citizens Hour Season 2, in partnership with the National Endowment for Democracy, NED, on West Africa Democracy.